How has the shape of data changed, and what does context mean versus data of the old days?
Agents use data much more like people do than what computers used to be able to do with data. 10, 15 years ago, the only thing you could really automate in your enterprise was something where you had structured data in a database and the computer could analyze the data, calculate it, move it through a workflow, or use it to power a workflow process. That was really the only part of the data estate that you could really bring the full power of compute to. Unstructured data, the stuff that's inside of your PowerPoint files and research documents and log files and all of that unstructured data, which just sits inside of files, and we have traditionally been able to automate the least amount about it for obvious reasons. And so AI kind of creates this incredible breakthrough where we can bring automation to all of the unstructured data. AI is basically a compute and energy play, essentially.
What's the last thing that needs to be solved for AI agents to really proliferate?
Like, job number one is...
Hey everybody, welcome to Navigators, our conversations with AI leaders about what's next and how they're building it. I'm Paul, founder of BrowserBase. I'm here with Aaron Levie, founder of Box. Aaron, thanks for taking the time today. I'm super excited.
Thanks for coming to our office. Makes it very easy.
Yeah, it's rare to put a trip down to beautiful Redwood City.
People are starting to figure out this place. So it's like there's construction everywhere. We have startups moving in, so we welcome anybody listening to join us in Redwood City.
Are there GPUs around too? Because I'm trying to move near the GPUs.
I think one of those buildings has it's always humming. So probably.
Is Redwood City the new AI hub of America? Some people are saying it is.
I think you're going to hear it first today. And no, there is the robotics company. Do you know Sunday Robotics?
Heard of it?
Redwood City. This is definitely the epicenter.
This is the epicenter, and Box is at the epicenter.
Well, we were here first, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe the creators of the epicenter. I have to ask. I mean, Aaron, you are like the Tom Brady of CEOs here. You've been doing this for so long, so many different transitions. I've 20 years. Congratulations on that. You know, over $1 billion of revenue. You've gone through 3 different technology changes, right? You know, the shift to cloud, the shift to mobile, and now the shift to AI. What has kind of been the through line for that for you as you've been building this company? Because you've almost maybe had to reinvent Box a little bit along the way every single time.
I'm just going to extend the Tom Brady analogy, which is great. I haven't gotten that much in my life. But I think I only know one thing, which is enterprise software and technology. And so you just keep doing it. I think like, you know, there's all these jokes that would happen like 3-4 years ago, like, you know, B2B SaaS became this funny kind of like tagline in Twitter banter. And for me, it's like, you know, what could be more important than the technology that powers how life sciences companies develop new drugs, how NASA goes to space, how films get produced and delivered to market, how you know, how we have, you know, breakthroughs that happen in the research community, in, you know, major universities. And so what all those things have in common is they're using software, they're using data, they're using, in this case, they're using our platform to go and do that. And so that kind of just makes it continues to make it fun at every single change in the technology landscape. And we happened to get very lucky. We didn't anticipate any of this when we started the company. We got lucky that we started creating a platform that can kind of compound in value as each of those phases, you know, kind of played out. So the cloud meant you got all the data into a place where you could actually kind of make it usable. Things like mobile made it so we could use our data in lots of new ways and in more places. And now AI is just like the final frontier of you have all this information, and now you can throw compute at all of this data and answer any question in your business and automate almost any workflow in your enterprise. And every AI model, every agent needs access to information to make it useful. So we're having, you know, easily the most fun we've ever had. It's obviously the most stressful time as well, just given how fast everything's changing, but it's we're having a blast.
Yeah, the multi-decade bet on data and the accumulation of data over time has really given, you know, a compounding advantage to Box and serving its customers well. I think we're calling data something differently now. We call it context. And this whole thing around context engineering and context graphs, like how has the shape of data changed and how you think about it for building for AI and what you advise your customers? Are we gonna have to throw away all our data and regenerate new data? Like what does context mean versus data of the old days?
This sort of plays into our hand quite a bit. which is agents use data much more like people do than like what computers used to be able to do with data. So 10, 15 years ago, the only thing you could really automate in your enterprise was something where you had structured data in a database, and the computer could, analyze the data, calculate it, move it through a workflow, or use it to power a workflow process. That was really the only part of the data estate that you could really, actually bring the full power of compute to. But that's actually the smallest portion of data we have in the world. Unstructured data, the stuff that's inside of your PowerPoint files and research documents and log files and marketing assets and contracts, all of that unstructured data, which just sits inside of files, it's actually the vast majority of data we generate on the planet. And we have traditionally been able to automate the least amount about it for obvious reasons. It's sort of, it's very hard to compute things in unstructured environments. And so AI kind of creates this incredible breakthrough where we can bring automation to all of the unstructured data. And that's about 90+% of data that most enterprises have. So the cool thing is we don't have to throw away any of our data. And in fact, the data that we've been working with as people now becomes extremely useful in a world of agents. And so you're having this almost kind of rebirth of the file system's important, and agents need access to a file system. And the more that you have agents that have their own computers, the more that they also need an environment to be able to store data often and be able to read data from. And so those are the things that we've been working on. We've primarily been working on those for people, but agents are commonly accessing technology and tools and data assets in the same way that a person did. The one benefit and the X factor is they can do it at 1,000 times the speed of a person. The one limiter is you have a very brief moment and a very brief window to give them the context they need to go do their task. And so that's sort of this massive context engineering problem, which is like in a very limited window, both in time and space, how do you give the agent the information it needs to work with to find the right data or answer the right question or pull in all of the documents that it needs to be able to do its work. So it's a really, really hard problem, but it's one that like we're incredibly excited by. We're in an era where I think you're going to be able to finally transform the data that we use in the organization. And the big problem that everybody has is effectively a context problem. So when you go to most organizations and enterprises, you think you're having an AI conversation when really you're having a data/context conversation. The problem really is just like, how do I get the AI agent the right access to the information it needs to be able to do its work? That kind of is basically 90% of the conversation we have with customers.
Yeah, it's funny. I asked Fable the other day, like, what can I do to make AI better? And it said, have a journal every night of the 3 things that are problems and write it down. It's asked me to label my day a little bit, right? Create more data, more context, make the models better. Right now, models are getting incredibly good, and we're solving a lot of engineering problems, and we have a lot more data. What's the last thing that needs to be solved for AI agents to really proliferate? I think that everything is solved. It's just like a diffusion issue. What problems have to be solved?
I think there's still lots of technology problems. I mean, each of the models kind of capabilities that you see improve, unlock another tranche of use case. So even Fable, there'll be a new set of legal, financial services, healthcare, life sciences use cases that get opened up. But there's no question that sort of Fable 7 or Fable 8 will unlock another 70% of the next sort of tranche of use cases. So I think that there's no we continue to need all the model progress that's possible. At the same time, and these two things can be true at once. You have a model overhang, which is basically the models are really powerful. They can do a tremendous amount of work. They can do far more work than they've actually been implemented for. And so the big question is, what is the sort of gap between the model's capability and the real world adoption? And that gap, ironically, actually probably continues to be widening over time, because the pace of the model progress is so fast and the rate of diffusion doesn't really change with model capability progress. It's like it's human-based, and it's process and systems and bureaucracy-based. And so that hasn't actually sped up at all. So weirdly, we're actually increasing the gap between model capability and sort of how have you upgraded all of your systems to be able to support that. And the big challenge is that it's kind of like 10 issues, but it is a mix of, can the agent get access to the right data? That's sort of a security, kind of question, and it's an access controls question, and it's a data formatting question. Does the underlying system that it's using have the right APIs and tools to access? That's a big question. Things like, browser use ends up being this great sort of, kind of escape hatch for all of that long tail. You have a big issue, which is the user on the other end are knowledgeable enough about the system and what it's capable of and how to prompt it properly and how to give it the right context of the work to do. Is the work itself, kind of verifiable, or do you need to go and review it? So that you have all of these issues that kind of are the real world limitations of or maybe the rate limiters on the rate of adoption. And in Silicon Valley, we have a little bit of a strong bias because most of the value creation in Silicon Valley is done through engineering and through kind of developing products. And so we get to see the benefits of these AI kind of coding gains very, very quickly. And engineers are able to deploy AI coding agents just incredibly rapidly. And think about AI coding has all these great properties. It's like the code base is already text. Most developers have access to most of the relevant code that they need to be able to work with. The models are trained on code just at a tremendous level. The work itself, you can kind of verify through a QA process and testing the code. And then we're all kind of connected online. So we're like seeing the best practices much more quickly. Take all of that. That's what's causing us to sort of experience this incredible fast vertical takeoff of AI in the tech industry and in Silicon Valley. Now go to the real world with a less technical user, with legacy systems, with data fragmented, through a bunch of environments, with access controls that you can't just give the agent to let them go roam around in all these systems, with kind of security, regulatory, compliance challenges that the enterprise maybe hasn't kind of quite resolved. So you have all of these issues that the real world faces for AI adoption, and I think we're in for a 5 to 10 year period of effectively bridging the way that we're using AI out here, and then how the rest of knowledge work will experience AI. And the good thing is that in that time, AI capability will only continue to progress. So by the time that in 2 years from now, when X company is finally rolling out their full agentic strategy, the models will be another 4x or 5x better than they are today, which will make them even more productive and effective when they deploy it.
It's almost like the real economy isn't yet seeing the benefits of AI as much as the Silicon Valley economy, because there's less guardrails. It's maybe a little bit more flexible.
I think it's probably going to be the case also that the real economy minus a couple areas, I'm thinking like life sciences, maybe some areas in finance, some deep research spaces. I think the Valley will actually almost always have an advantage over the rest of the economy because our economy is digital. So like AI right now it's really effective at doing digital things, and we have short of like complete Optimus robots in maybe 20 years or something, the rest of the economy, they have to make things. Those things have to get deployed and sold and instrumented, and there's lots of people that are involved in that. And so there was a great piece from Anthropic around the various kind of AI takeoff scenarios. And it was interesting because the AI takeoff scenario that they perceived, I think, be most likely, sort of at least underscored this point, but they probably underweighted the significance of the point. They basically said that the rest of the economy of real world drug development and manufacturing and all of these kinds of real world tasks are not as they can't change at the rate that compute can change. And so AI is basically a compute and energy play, essentially. Like at the end of the day is like AI takeoff will happen at the rate that compute and we can do the energy side. But there's a lot of the world that doesn't move any faster as a result of those things. Like in the examples they gave were like, you still have to test the drug in real experiments and see how it deals with our biology. No amount of compute other than simulating, the outcomes is going to change that. So I think the thing that we have to realize is Silicon Valley will probably always be moving faster than the rest of the economy. AI will help most of the economy get new forms of productivity gain. They'll be able to understand their customers better. They'll market their products better. They'll onboard clients faster. They'll be able to design products much more quickly. But we will always have this Silicon Valley versus the rest of the world divide, simply because our business models are digital by nature.
And that kind of segues nicely into Box's business and your customers, because there's what's a huge percentage of the Fortune 500 uses Box. Those are large companies with a lot of real economy impact. How have you seen Box and the AI stuff that Box is working on apply to those companies and actually create impact? Is that helping some of these real economies? That's still very digital for you.
We impact the digital parts of the real economy, businesses. So it's the jet engine maker that needs to do R&D and collaborate across their supply chain. It's the commercial real estate firm that has lots of contracts, and they want to be able to use AI to accelerate, all getting the data from all those contracts and putting that into a system that lets them analyze their customer base and give them the right, sort of insights at the right moment. It's the law firm that wants to be able to look through due diligence documents and discover risks for a client. So that's the way that we're seeing AI show up across the real world. And that is used for everything from how do we accelerate a business process so we can just do that thing far faster. The part that I'm probably more excited by is when customers, and we hear use cases where customers are using AI to do things that they just didn't do before. So they're throwing agents at problems that a person never could have done. It's the CPG company that is doing brand asset sort of verification and quality checks in a way that people just never had the time to review everything going on in the business, or the life sciences firm that's trying to deploy agents across all of their research. Or the recruiting, agency that is, sort of better aligning talent to jobs much faster. These are all things that it's not replacing what a person did. It's just actually magnifying what the ultimate work is that the person's doing. So we get to hear all of those use cases, and these are the kind of real world ways that AI is showing up in the enterprise. And again, the exciting thing is that they all relate to how much data do you have? How well organized is that data? Can AI agents access the right information? So that's where we kind of get most of our lessons from.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're aware that many people look at your tweets every day and try and use it as almost a bit of an oracle of how Aaron is thinking about what's going to happen for these businesses.
I mean, these are very small data points we're operating off of, so trade at your
somehow they get a lot of likes, I guess. So yeah, I'll have to do the poly market for the next tweet. I'm curious, knowing that CEOs and founders, looking to your takes on AI. You talked a lot about rebuilding your business to be AI native internally, and I'm curious about what's been working for Box as you've taken on a lot more AI initiatives. Have you changed your operating model? Because it's been working for 20 years. Why mess it up?
Your goal is not to mess it up. So so that would be kind of job number one, is don't screw anything up. We are changing our operating model, but I'm probably a little bit more, due to just, again, kind of being on the enterprise side, I'm probably a little bit more pragmatic than not. We're not trying to just kind of recreate everything in the business. I really think about it as just accelerate everything. So obviously, we're all doing the same thing on product development. So accelerate all engineering, with the power of AI agents. And so that's check that box. That's quite straightforward. I think we all understand how that works. Then the next thing is where are, we kind of think about it as what parts of our business are some mix of kind of compute and information limited, where if you could apply more compute at a problem with access to any amount of information, what parts of our business would go faster and would be able to do way more? And so that leads you to things okay, well, some basics, we could onboard employees far faster because they could just instantly get the intelligence of the entire organization at their disposal for any topic that they're running into. Okay, that's straightforward. That takes all of our intelligence and knowledge internally and lets you have agents on that. And we do that, natively within Box. Then there's use cases, which is, okay, well, how do you use compute and agents to be able to say, okay, we're in front of this customer, what's exactly the right thing to pitch them? Or something's going on in this customer environment. We have an agent that looks at a bunch of signals from the customer and we say, okay, this is exactly the right moment to reach out to them with this particular message. So we kind of think about it as where in the business if you could throw more capacity at a problem, would you get a better result as measured by more deals, better deals, more, larger deals, better, employees that we can kind of attract, easier ways to onboard them, better ways to ramp them to get to productivity. That's kind of how we think about the problem. And we kind of rank order the areas where then we should be deploying and working on agents. Some of those are things that we kind of get off the shelf from partners. Some of them we're building within Box, and then some of those, we'll go and create kind of custom agents using a mix of solutions.
Yeah, and I imagine that not only is the internal functionality of Box evolving, but the way that you ship your products or show your products to customers is evolving. You've talked a lot about the headless applications or headless SaaS. How do you make something like Box headless or customers consume via agents in the future?
Yeah, so the thing that I think is pretty a very easy prediction at this point is, at each year going forward, there's probably going to be some doubling of the amount of internet users, and probably 10xing of internet users that are agents over people. So Matthew Prince from Cloudflare, I think, just announced we just crossed over in agents over human users on the internet. it would be easy to think about that as, again, kind of 2, 5, 10x more in a year from now and so on. So you've got this kind of Moore's law of how many agents versus humans are on the internet. And so then it stands to reason, well, if you have 100 times more agents than people, on the internet or using tools, then that will also be true within an enterprise. So if you have 100 times more agents than people in an enterprise, then that means that you have to ensure that your software is built in an API first way that works with those agents. And that has a series of interesting questions. There's some kind of emotional questions, which is like, well, what about my UI and what happened to that? And then there's some very real just business model questions, which is, most software in the SaaS, kind of ecosystem is priced on a kind of per user basis. And we give you kind of, near unlimited usage of software per user. Like, you can't log into Workday that many times and get banned as a user. Like, there's no way to like get rate limited as a regular person using Workday. But what if an agent, bangs against Workday 10,000 times? Probably that's something that like exceeds some threshold that they were sort of not anticipating from a business model standpoint. The big thing that everybody is trying to figure out is, okay, we all get it. We're going to have APIs that are really, really good. In our case, we're lucky because we've been, doing APIs since nearly day one of the company. And so headless boxes already existed. It was just machines were accessing us, not sort of agentic users. And then the question is, what's the business model of this? I think that leads you obviously to more of a consumption-based approach on top of seats. Where I think Wall Street and some other ecosystems get it wrong is like, these things are not binary. A person using your software probably still should be a seat. It's just like a predictable model. It sort of, there's no reason to kind of blow that up. But agent users have a kind of unbounded scale potential. Like, they could be, again, they could be using it. One agent could use it a couple times, another agent could use it 10 million times. And so you obviously need more of a consumption model for that kind of dynamic. And then we just all have to have our business models kind of get upgraded to support that.
You recently been talking a lot about the labs and the applied layer and the different challenges and tensions between the two. What's going to happen there, and what do you think for those types of companies to think about?
Yeah, I would say fully hard to know what kind of completely happens in the context of time. I think maybe a couple quick things. One, I think actually history is pretty instructive on the hyperscalers, actually, as an example. The hyperscalers, we always had this interesting dynamic, which was the hyperscalers sort of started at core infrastructure and then built services more and more over time. And you would have looked at that and said, well, then they should just gobble up all of technology. And then it turns out that you fast forward 10, 15 years later, and Databricks is a $175 billion company. Snowflake is a $90 billion company. Mongo's a $20, $30 billion company. Cloudflare is a $100 billion company. Twilio is a $20, $30 billion company. And the list goes on. So how is it that in this world where the infrastructure was so abundant, they had tons of incentive to create commoditized versions of everything possible? Why is it that there's still, $500 billion of market cap just in, the kind of most obvious, 10, 15 names, probably $1 trillion in total, once you add the long tail of companies that basically ride on top of this infrastructure and add sort of value to it? It's because the applied layer of technology is sort of always the last mile thing that is needed between the core raw materials that are being produced and the ultimate implementation for customers. There's this sort of idea that if you're bitter lesson pilled, then you would believe that the model will just get so much more capable over time that it eats into that entire applied layer to the point where the model is just so powerful that you need nothing else. And in the real world, there's just, back to the earlier part of the conversation, like, the real world has so many things that it needs to get right between compliance and security and data access and the context that the model gets. The language itself of the product to the end user, all of those things are basically what needs to happen to make these agents or models get applied to real world use cases. And so then the real question is, okay, do the frontier labs do that in a very deep way for every single vertical, for every single domain? And I think there's a real chance that they try, and there's a real chance that actually in 2, 3, 4 verticals they totally crush it, and that will be the proof point that everybody uses to think that, like, okay, well then it favors the frontier labs. But I would generally bet that we have this really healthy ecosystem of, yes, there'll be horizontal technology from frontier labs, and some of that will get kind of tuned to different environments by the customer. But then there's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity on these kind of vertical applications Maybe they're in a line of business, maybe they're in a specific industry, maybe they just handle one of the task types or job functions that actually go and apply the underlying model capabilities to the job to be done by that customer. And they will have the right kinds of specialists, they'll have the right kinds of FDEs, they'll actually be able to go help the customer with the change management, they can make sure the right data systems are plugged into the agent. As soon as a model kind of upgrades, they can make sure that upgrade doesn't sort of break the underlying wiring, so they can kind of handhold the customer through that journey. So you're gonna see just a tremendous amount of opportunity at that applied layer. So I think the debate has been sort of wrong because it sort of really thinks about this as, well, it's just all the model, and as soon as the model gets good enough, it wipes everything else out. When actually you need far more than the model to really be able to pull off a lot of the use cases that are these real world use cases in the enterprise.
It's almost like there's like verticalized infrastructure stacks where someone can build deeply into a type of agent and select the right models and provide the right primitives to make sure that you're getting the most token efficiency out of that model for that use case.
This maybe wouldn't have mattered like a year ago as much, but especially right now when you can see how expensive the tokens are getting, and rightfully so, because they're solving just harder and harder problems, and they're more powerful than ever before. You do actually end up at a point where the cost of sort of the very edge of the frontier versus the cost of like what the frontier was 3 months ago, like you could actually have like a 10x spread in that cost at this point, and maybe even 50x spread if you go to a really kind of kind of tailored open weights model. And so in a world where you have a 10 to 50x spread in frontier and kind of frontier -1, then actually like the ability to route tasks to different tiers of models becomes really important. And so who's going to be both incentivized the most to route effectively, but also capable of routing effectively? It's going to be the companies that understand the tasks at hand. You really can't do like intent-based routing on a contract review process in an M&A transaction if you don't understand that use case well enough to know at what point should I be using Fable or GPT 5.5 or 5.6 whenever that comes, versus when I should go to Nemotron for that task. So the applied layer is sort of in the best position. So it's actually a really interesting argument, which is actually you can be super bitter lesson pilled and purely just for economic rationality believe that the applied layer is still going to be in this very strategic position because they are not wedded to burning down a certain amount of compute on the frontier model only. They are actually they're only wedded to solving the task for the customer in the most efficient way possible. So I think there's multiple reasons at this point where the bet has shifted and the applied layer is going to be very much in favor. And again, because everybody kind of treats all these things as binary, that can both be true, and you should still expect the frontier labs to, triple and quintuple and, grow revenue at an incredible pace, because it's going to still be the frontier models that are performing the best at those top tier tasks.
It seems like the way that you build an enterprise company is changing. And I actually, when I first started Browserbase, I saw a lecture from you on YouTube. It was like you at Stanford, it's with A16Z, and it was like building enterprise software. And you come out blaring music with this slide deck. And you talk about how Box started out not trying to be an enterprise company. When you think about the founders starting companies today, they're going to have to go through so much more uncertainty and unpredictability. If you had to start over today, what are some of the principles that you'd want to carry over with you into the next company you build?
There's a lot of commentary on this right now that is insightful around, we have to assume that the cost of building something is going down by 10x. You still have to build amazing products. You have to have a high degree of taste of like, how does the thing get configured and how do you make it easy to use, and how do you have the right features show up in the right places? There's gonna be a lot of slop software that gets built. And so like job number one is separate yourself from the slop. And that means build just high quality software, really robust technology, make it look amazing, make it easy to use. So that's like task number one. But I do think a lot of companies sort of stop at task number one, and then they think, okay, well, if we build this thing and then it's got high taste and it kind of feels great, then all the users will show up. And I do think that we're in an environment where, because the cost of developing the software has dropped tremendously, now really the new problem is, can you get to customers? Can you engage with them? Can you actually like understand their problems deeply and support their usage of your product and get in front of them in the right ways? So coincidentally, in a world of abundant engineering, one of the new forms of scarcity is going to be really, really high quality go-to-market, as an example. And so companies that kind of start to understand how important that's going to be as a variable, I think will be in a better position. Interestingly, it was probably more subtle in whatever talk I was giving, but like this is actually something that like we identified pretty early on, which was, there were a lot of startups in early kind of SaaS waves that were like, okay, we'll just build this product and everybody will figure it out. And it's like, no, like the companies that win are those that can get in front of the customer, deliver them their unique value proposition, work with them in a consultative fashion. I think this idea of the FDE is a very real trend that is sort of is not going to go away, because companies in the real world are going to need a lot of support to be able to go and deploy agents within their environments. They often aren't going to have all the technical expertise necessary to go do that. So you're going to see a huge need for companies that like I would automatically bet on the startup that like invests deeply in FDE and go to market and builds the sales team, because these are, in a world where the software is easier to replicate, it's going to actually be how customer centric can you be. That would be probably my kind of most generic advice I could give any off the street startup right now.
Well, if you do ever start a second one, I'd love to invest. So let me know. Okay. Well, Aaron, I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
It's been a super great conversation. So thanks for having us in the office. We appreciate it.